The massive crystal chamber floated in the dark space around the neutron star like a jewel made of light and hope. Inside the chamber, 847 different alien species sat in their special seats that were made just for their bodies. Some had tentacles, and some had wings, and some had scales that changed color when they talked. The air in the chamber was perfect for everyone to breathe, because the machines made it just right for all the different kinds of life that came to these meetings. Council Speaker Vextar stood on the center platform with his 4 arms spread wide and his silver skin glowing under the soft lights. His voice came out in waves that every species could understand no matter what language they spoke. Today was different from all the other council meetings because today they had to talk about something that scared everyone. Something was coming from the dark, empty space between galaxies, and it was getting closer every day. But when Vextar looked around the chamber, he saw something wrong right away. In Section 12, where the humans always sat there, were only empty chairs. The blue and white flag of Earth hung still and quiet above 20 empty seats. No one sat there, and no one had come to speak for the humans today. Delegate Morthak from the Crystalline Empire raised one of his 6 hands to speak. His body was made of living rock that sparkled when he moved, and his voice sounded like stones falling down a mountain. Council Speaker, where are the humans today? They always come to these meetings even when we do not want them here. They ask too many questions and they worry about things that have not happened yet. But today their seats are empty and this makes me feel strange inside. Vexatar touched the communication panel with his long fingers and tried to contact Earth. The hologram screen showed only static and empty space where Earth's signal should be. He tried again and again, but nothing came back from the human homeworld. No voices and no messages and no angry complaints about council decisions like there usually were. The human communication arrays are not responding, Vexatar said, and his silver skin turned darker with worry. We have been trying to reach them for 6 months now, but there is only silence from their space. Their ships do not answer our calls, and their colonies send no reports. It is as if they have all disappeared from the galaxy at the same time. Ambassador Kyla Ara from the Peaceful Federation stood up on her thin legs that bent in 3 places. Her large eyes filled with tears that glowed purple in the chamber light. But this cannot be true. The humans cannot just be gone. They have been part of our council for 200 years. Minyo Kim was here just last year, telling us about new trade routes and complaining about our military spending. Yuna Park sent us reports from the outer colonies every month until 6 months ago. Where did they all go? The chamber filled with nervous sounds as hundreds of different species began to talk at once. Some clicked their claws on their seats, and some made humming noises deep in their throats. Others flashed bright colors on their skin, or released chemical signals into the air that smelled like fear and confusion. Delegate Zoran from the warrior clans stood up, and his massive frame blocked the light from 3 different wall panels. His red skin was covered in scars from old battles, and his voice was deep like thunder in the mountains. Perhaps the humans have finally shown their true nature. Perhaps they have decided to attack someone, and they are hiding until they are ready to strike. We always knew they were dangerous and unpredictable. Maybe now they are planning something terrible. But Delegate Thias from the Science Coalition shook her blue head with its crown of moving tentacles. No, that is not right. Our sensors show that all human defense systems are still working perfectly. Their automated weapons platforms are still active around their worlds, and their space stations still patrol their trade routes. But there are no life signs anywhere. No humans on their ships, and no humans in their cities, and no humans in their military bases. The machines keep working, but the people are gone. Council Speaker Vextar called up the holographic displays that showed the current map of known space. Thousands of star systems appeared in the air above their heads like tiny lights floating in the darkness. The human territory was marked in blue, and it covered almost 1/4 of the galaxy. But now, when they looked at those blue stars, there were no signs of human life anywhere. "Show us the last communication from the humans," Vextar said to the central computer. The hologram changed to show a recording from 6 months ago. A tired-looking human woman appeared in the light. She had dark hair and wore the blue uniform of the Human Diplomatic Corps. "This is Han Song speaking for the Human Federation Council," the recording said. We are sending this message to warn all Council members about the threat approaching from outside our galaxy. Our deep space sensors have detected massive energy signatures moving toward us from the void between galaxies. These signatures do not match any known form of life or technology. We believe they represent an existential threat to all organic life in our galaxy. The recording continued, and Haeun Song's face looked more worried with each word she spoke. We have tried to share this information with the Council for the past year, but our warnings have been dismissed as human paranoia. We understand that other species see us as overly cautious and always expecting the worst to happen. But this time, our fears are real, and the danger is coming whether we are ready or not. The hologram flickered and showed star charts with red markers moving slowly toward their galaxy. We estimate that these entities will reach our outer systems within 18 months. We do not know what they want or how to communicate with them. All we know is that every star system they have passed through has gone dark and silent. No signals and no life signs remain behind them. Haeun Song looked directly at the camera, and her voice became very serious. The Human Federation is implementing emergency protocols to protect our population and preserve our civilization. We may not be able to maintain regular contact with the Council during this time. Please do not interpret our silence as abandonment. We are preparing for the worst while hoping for the best as we always do. The recording ended, and the chamber fell completely silent. No one moved or spoke for long minutes as they thought about what they had just heard. Finally, Delegate Morthak spoke again, and his rocky voice was much quieter than before. We thought they were being paranoid again. We thought they were seeing enemies where none existed. The humans always worried about impossible threats and made plans for disasters that would never happen. So when they told us about entities from outside the galaxy, we did not listen. We thought it was just another human fear that would never come true. Ambassador Kilara wiped the purple tears from her large eyes. But what if they were right this time? What if there really is something coming and the humans knew about it first? What if they tried to warn us, and we ignored them because we thought they were just being afraid of everything like always? Council Speaker Vexitar touched the communication panel again and tried one more time to reach any human ship or station or colony anywhere in the galaxy. But there was still only silence. The humans were gone and no one knew where they had went or why they had left or if they were even still alive somewhere. We must investigate this immediately, Vexitar said to the assembled delegates. We must send ships to human space and find out what happened to them. And we must also prepare for the possibility that their warnings about the approaching threat were real. If the humans were right, then we may all be in terrible danger, and we may have lost our best chance to prepare for it. The council session continued long into the night, as delegates argued about what to do next. But deep in space, the automated, human defense systems kept working and waiting for orders that would never come from voices that had gone silent forever. 3 days after the council meeting, teams of investigators arrived at the first human colony world. The planet looked normal from space with its blue oceans and white clouds and the lights of cities still glowing on the night side. But when they landed their ships and walked through the empty streets, they found something that made their blood run cold in their veins. Everything was clean and organized, like the humans had just stepped away for a moment. Coffee cups sat on tables still warm from the machines that kept making drinks for people who were no longer there. Gardens were watered by automatic systems, and the flowers bloomed in perfect rows. Traffic lights changed colors for vehicles. That would never come. But there were no humans anywhere to be found. The investigation team leader was Commander Vex Thule from the Military Alliance. He had fought beside human soldiers in 3 different wars, and he knew how they lived and worked and thought. But walking through the empty human city made him feel sick inside because nothing looked like a battle had happened here or like people had run away in fear. This is not how humans leave a place, he said to his team as they searched through houses and offices and schools. When humans are in danger, they fight or they run, but they do not leave everything so neat and perfect. Their homes still have family pictures on the walls, and their closets still have clothes hanging in them. Their children's toys are still put away carefully in boxes. This looks like they plan to come back soon. Dr. Sil Enna from the Science Coalition was scanning everything with her instruments, looking for clues about what had happened. Her tentacles moved quickly over the control panels as she read the data from her machines. The last life signs on this planet were detected exactly 6 months and 3 days ago. At precisely 1400 hours local time, every human life sign disappeared within a span of 30 minutes. No signs of violence and no signs of struggle and no signs of mass evacuation. They found the planetary communications center still running with all its lights blinking and all its screens showing normal operations. But the message logs showed something very strange. For the past 18 months, the humans had been sending reports about sensor readings from the deep space monitoring stations. The reports talked about energy signatures and movement patterns and threat assessments that other species had dismissed as human overreaction. Commander Vex Thule pulled up the files and began reading them out loud to his team. Report from Dongyun Choi, Chief Scientist at Deep Space Station Alpha 7. Date 18 months ago. Subject unknown, energy signatures detected at Galactic Edge. Long-range sensors are picking up massive objects moving toward our galaxy from the intergalactic void. Energy patterns do not match any known technology or natural phenomena. The next report was even more worried. Follow-up report from Dongyun Choi. The objects are definitely artificial and they are moving with purpose toward our galaxy. Size estimates suggest structures larger than most star systems. Energy output is beyond our ability to measure accurately. Recommend immediate council notification and preparation of defensive measures. Dr. Selena found more files in the planetary database. Look at this communication log from Haeun Song, the diplomatic attaché. She sent 47 different messages to the council over the past year and a half. Each message contained more detailed information about the approaching threat. Each message was marked as low priority by the Council Review Board because they thought it was just human paranoia again. The messages from Haeun Song showed how frustrated the humans had become as time went on. The early messages were polite and formal, using diplomatic language to describe their concerns. But the later messages were more direct and urgent as the humans realized that nobody was listening to their warnings. Council members, please understand that this is not a drill or a false alarm, one message said. Our deep space sensors are the most advanced in the galaxy, and they do not make mistakes about things this big. The entities approaching us have already consumed 17 star systems in the neighboring galaxy. We have intercepted faint distress signals from those systems before they went dark forever, but the council responses were always the same. Thank you for your report. The matter will be reviewed by the appropriate committees. Please do not send additional communications about this subject unless you have new evidence to present. The investigation team found shipping records that showed something even more strange. For the past year, human cargo ships had been moving massive amounts of supplies and equipment to locations that were not listed in any public database. Construction, materials and food supplies and manufactured goods had been disappearing from human space in quantities large enough to supply entire populations. They were building something, Commander Vex Thule said as he studied the shipping manifests. But building what and building where? The cargo ships all left human space, but none of them reported their destinations, and none of them ever came back to pick up more supplies. Dr. Selena discovered research files that had been hidden in encrypted databases throughout human space. The files contained theoretical studies about dimensional manipulation and space-time engineering that were far beyond what anyone thought human science could achieve. The lead researcher was someone named Taehyung Oh, and his work dealt with creating stable pockets of space that existed outside normal reality. This research suggests they were trying to build some kind of refuge, Dr. Selena said as her tentacles moved over the control panels, reading the complex mathematical formulas. A place where large populations could survive outside normal space-time if the galaxy became too dangerous to live in. But the energy requirements for something like this would be enormous. The team found personal video logs left behind by ordinary human citizens. A teacher named Minji Bae had recorded messages for her students, explaining that she was going somewhere safe, but could not tell them where. A factory worker named Kyung-jae Lim left instructions for maintaining the automated systems that would keep the factories running even with no one there to supervise them. We do not know when we will be able to return, Minji Bae said in her recording. But we want you to know that we are not abandoning our friends in the galaxy. We are preparing a safe place where everyone can come if the worst happens. The Council does not believe our warnings about the danger, but we cannot wait for them to change their minds. The investigation team visited 12 more human worlds and found the same thing everywhere. Clean, empty cities with all the machines still working perfectly. Personal belongings left behind as if people planned to return soon. No signs of panic or violence or forced evacuation. Just the quiet absence of an entire species that had vanished according to some plan that no one else had known about. The last world they visited, the team found a message beacon that had been set to activate 30 days after the disappearance. The beacon contained a final communication from someone identified as Seungjin Kang, who appeared to be a colony ship captain. "If you are receiving this message, then you are investigating what happened to the human population," the recording said. "We want you to know that we did not abandon our responsibilities or our friendships with other species. We spent 2 years trying to warn the Council about the approaching threat. We shared our sensor data and our analysis and our predictions, but nobody wanted to listen." Seungjin Kang looked tired and sad in the recording, but his voice was strong and determined. "We could not force other species to believe us, but we could not stand by and watch our people die when we knew the danger was real. So we made the hardest decision in human history. We decided to save ourselves and hope that someday we could save everyone else too." The beacon message continued with technical details about the entities approaching from intergalactic space. They consume not just matter and energy, but space and time itself. Conventional weapons will not work against them because they exist partially outside our reality. The only defense is to not be here when they arrive. We have prepared a refuge outside normal space-time where we can wait until the danger passes. We also prepared contingency plans in case other species eventually need the same kind of protection. We hope the Council will never need these plans, but if the worst happens, then look for the signs we have left behind. The recording ended with coordinates to hidden databases throughout the galaxy where the humans had stored information about their evacuation plans and their research into dimensional refuge technology, but the files were encrypted with codes that would take years to break. Commander Vex Thule and his team returned to the Council with their report. The evidence was clear that the humans had not been destroyed or captured. They had evacuated their entire population, according to some massive plan that they had been working on for almost 2 years. They had tried to warn the Council about approaching danger, but their warnings had been ignored as usual. "The humans were right," Commander Vex Thule told the assembled delegates. "There is something coming from outside our galaxy, and it is exactly as dangerous as they said it would be. They tried to tell us, but we did not listen because we thought they were just being paranoid again. Now they are gone, and we do not know how to contact them or how to follow them to safety." 14 months after the humans disappeared, the entities finally arrived at the edge of the galaxy, just as the human warnings had predicted. The first sign was when the outer monitoring stations went silent one by one in a pattern that moved steadily inward toward the core worlds. Each station transmitted normal readings until the exact moment when all signals stopped forever. The Galactic Defense Fleet mobilized every ship they had and sent them to investigate the disappearing stations. Admiral Torak commanded the largest battle group in Council history with vessels from over 200 different species. The ships ranged from massive crystalline dreadnoughts that could shatter planets to tiny fighter craft that moved faster than light itself. But when the fleet reached the location where monitoring station Epsilon had been, they found something that made no sense at all. The space where the station should have been was completely empty, but not in the way that empty space usually looked. This emptiness was different, like someone had removed not just the matter and energy, but the very idea that anything had ever existed there. "Sensors are showing impossible readings," reported Science Officer Kilmar from the flagship bridge. "There is no debris from the station and no radiation signatures and no gravitational disturbances. According to our instruments, nothing has ever been in this location. But we have video recordings of the station transmitting normally just 6 hours ago. Admiral Torak had fought in dozens of battles against pirates and rebels and invading armies, but he had never seen anything like this before. Send probe drones to scan the area for any traces of what happened here, and maintain defensive formation in case whatever did this is still nearby." The probe drones flew into the empty space, and for a few minutes, they transmitted normal sensor data. Then, one by one, the probes simply stopped existing. Not destroyed or damaged or shut down, but completely removed from reality, as if they had never been built or launched at all. "Admiral, we are detecting massive energy signatures approaching from the galactic rim," called out Tactical Officer Zexnara. "Multiple contacts, each one larger than a small moon. They are moving at significant sublight speed directly toward our position." On the main display screen, Strange shapes began to appear at the edge of sensor range. They looked like living shadows that twisted and changed form as they moved through space. The entities seemed to exist in more dimensions than normal matter could handle, and looking at them for too long made the crew members feel sick and confused. The largest entity approached the defense fleet directly without showing any signs of communication or negotiation. It was roughly spherical, but the surface kept shifting between solid matter and empty void. Parts of it seemed to exist in normal space, while other parts flickered in and out of reality like a broken hologram. Admiral Torok ordered all ships to open fire with every weapon they had. Plasma cannons and particle beams and antimatter torpedoes lit up the space around the entity in a display of destruction that should have been visible from several star systems away. But the weapons had no effect at all. The energy beams passed through the entity as if it was not there, while the missiles simply ceased to exist when they got too close. "Sir, the entity is doing something to local space-time," Science Officer Kielmar reported with fear in his voice. "Gravity is becoming unstable, and several laws of physics appear to have stopped working in our immediate area. I recommend immediate withdrawal before we lose the ability to maintain cohesion as organized matter." But Admiral Torok knew that retreat would only delay the inevitable. If these entities could remove space stations from existence and ignore the most powerful weapons in the galaxy, then nowhere would be safe from them. "Send an emergency transmission to the Council. Tell them we need the Universal Reset Protocol activated immediately." The Universal Reset Protocol was the most dangerous weapon the Council had ever built. It had been designed by scientists from dozens of species working together on a project so secret that most Council members did not even know it existed. The weapon could rewrite the fundamental laws of physics in a localized area of space, but using it carried risks that no one fully understood. The project had started decades ago when theoretical physicists realized that if the universe was some kind of information system, then it might be possible to edit that information directly. A human scientist named Tae-Hyung Oh had contributed crucial research about dimensional manipulation that made the weapon possible. But Oh had also written extensive warnings about why the weapon should never be used. Reality editing at this scale creates unpredictable cascade effects, Oh had written in his research notes. Changing the fundamental properties of space-time in one location will cause changes to propagate throughout the entire universe. We cannot predict what those changes will be or whether they will allow organic life to continue existing. Back at the Council chamber, emergency alarms were sounding as delegates received reports from the defense fleet. The entities had already consumed 12 more star systems and were moving steadily toward the core worlds where billions of people lived and worked and raised their families. Council Speaker Vextar called for an immediate vote on activating the Universal Reset Protocol. "We have no other options remaining. Conventional weapons are useless against these entities, and they are destroying everything in their path. If we do not act now, then our entire civilization will be consumed within days." The debate was short because there was no time for long discussions. Delegate after delegate stood up to voice their support for using the weapon despite the unknown risks. Even the most cautious species agreed that anything was better than total extinction. "The human researcher Tae-Hyung Oh warned us about using this weapon," said Delegate Morthak from his crystalline throne. "But the humans also warned us about the entities, and we ignored those warnings too. Perhaps this time we should have listened to human advice about both the threat and the solution. But it was too late for regrets now. The vote was unanimous to activate the Universal Reset Protocol. The weapon was housed in a hidden facility orbiting the galactic core where the energy requirements could be met by tapping directly into the central black hole. Teams of technicians, who had spent their entire careers preparing for this moment, began the activation sequence. The weapon itself looked surprisingly simple for something that could rewrite reality. It was basically a large crystalline structure surrounded by exotic matter containment fields and quantum processing arrays. But the mathematics behind its operation were so complex that only the most advanced artificial intelligences could handle the calculations in real time. "All systems are ready for activation," reported Chief Engineer Dilasa over the communication link. "Final safety checks are complete, and target parameters are locked in. The weapon will affect approximately 20% of galactic space, including all areas where the entities have been detected. Council Speaker Vextar placed his hand on the authorization scanner and spoke the final command sequence. For the preservation of organic life in this galaxy, I hereby authorize activation of the Universal Reset Protocol. May whatever gods watch over us have mercy on our souls. The activation switch was a simple red button that looked exactly like thousands of other buttons throughout the facility. But when Vextar pressed it, the very nature of reality began to change in ways that no living being had ever experienced before. At first, nothing seemed to happen because the weapon's effects propagated at the speed of light and would take time to reach the battle zone. But sensitive instruments throughout the galaxy began detecting subtle changes in the fundamental constants that governed how matter and energy behaved. When the reality wave reached the defense fleet, the results were immediately visible. The mysterious entities began to flicker and fade as if they were losing their ability to exist in the modified space-time. Their twisted forms became less stable, and parts of them started dissolving back into the quantum foam that underlies all of existence. But the weapon also began affecting the Council ships and their crews in unexpected ways. Some vessels found that their faster-than-light drives no longer worked because the mathematical relationships that made such travel possible had been changed. Other ships discovered that their crew members were experiencing multiple versions of themselves simultaneously as parallel timelines began to merge and separate randomly. Admiral Torak watched in horror as reality became fluid around him. His ship's bridge existed in several different configurations at the same time, and his crew members kept flickering between different versions of themselves. Some were older and some were younger, and some appeared to be from alternate timelines, where different choices had been made. "What have we done?" he whispered, as he saw stars in the distance beginning to change color and position as space itself was edited and rewritten. "We saved ourselves from the entities, but we may have destroyed everything else in the process." The Universal Reset Protocol continued its work of rewriting local reality according to parameters that had seemed reasonable when the weapon was designed, but nobody had fully understood what would happen when you changed the fundamental rules that governed how the universe operated. Reality split apart like a broken mirror, with each piece showing a different version of what had happened, or what might happen, or what should never have happened at all. Council Speaker Vexatar found himself experiencing 17 different timelines simultaneously, and in each one, the activation of the Universal Reset Protocol had caused different catastrophic results. In one timeline, the weapon had worked perfectly, and the entities were destroyed without any other effects. In another timeline, the weapon had failed completely and the entities had consumed the entire galaxy while the Council watched helplessly. In a third timeline, the entities had never existed at all and the humans had never disappeared, and everything was exactly as it had been before the crisis began. But the strangest timeline was the one where Vextar could see human ships returning to help fight the entities using weapons and technology that seemed to be based on the same principles as the Universal Reset Protocol. In that timeline, the humans had not fled but had stayed to fight and had somehow developed countermeasures against the reality-consuming entities. "This is impossible," Vextar said to himself as his consciousness shifted between different versions of reality. "How can all of these things be true at the same time? How can I remember events that happened differently in each timeline? How can I be living through multiple versions of my own life?" Across the galaxy, other people were experiencing the same temporal fracturing. Delegate Morthak found himself remembering a timeline where the humans had never left but had instead shared their dimensional refuge technology with every species in the Council. In that reality, the entities had arrived to find the galaxy completely empty because everyone had evacuated to pocket dimensions until the danger passed. But he also remembered another timeline where the humans had returned with advanced weapons, just in time to fight alongside the Council forces. In that version, a human commander named Jung-Ho Nam had led a fleet of ships that could exist partially outside normal space-time, making them immune to the entity's reality-consuming effects. Dr. Baez. Silena experienced memories of working closely with human scientists to understand the approaching threat. In one timeline, she had collaborated with a researcher named Soman Han, who had figured out how to communicate with the entities and discover that they were not malicious, but were actually trying to flee from something even more dangerous that existed in the space between galaxies. The fracturing of time created situations that should have been impossible. People found themselves having conversations with versions of themselves from other timelines. Ships appeared and disappeared as they flickered between different possible histories. Some star systems existed in multiple states at once, while others vanished completely from all timelines. Admiral Torok discovered that in several timelines, his defense fleet had been reinforced by human ships that used technology he had never seen before. The human vessels could phase in and out of normal space at will, and their weapons could affect entities that normal matter could not even touch. But in other timelines, the humans had never existed at all, and the galaxy had developed completely different defensive strategies. The most disturbing timeline was the one where the Universal Reset Protocol had worked too well and had erased not just the entities but most of organized matter in the galaxy. In that version, space itself had become unstable, and stars were collapsing into quantum foam as the fundamental forces that held atoms together began to fail. But there was also a timeline that gave everyone hope. In that reality, the humans had predicted exactly what would happen when the Council activated the reality weapon, and they had prepared countermeasures in advance. A human military strategist named Yuxin Yang had developed a plan that used the timeline fracturing effect to create multiple backup versions of galactic civilization. The humans knew this would happen. Admiral Torok realized as he experienced memories from the hopeful timeline. They knew we would eventually use the weapon, and they knew it would fracture reality. That is why they evacuated not just to protect themselves, but to create a stable reference point outside the affected area. The timeline fracturing was getting worse as the weapon's effects continued to propagate throughout the galaxy. Some people began to lose their ability to distinguish between different versions of reality, and they started making decisions based on memories from timelines that had never actually happened. Council meetings became impossible because delegates would argue about events that had occurred differently in each timeline. Some remembered the humans as cowards who had abandoned everyone, while others remembered them as heroes who had stayed to fight. Some remembered the entities as destroyers, while others remembered them as refugees seeking help. But gradually a pattern began to emerge from the chaos. In every timeline where the outcome was positive, the humans had played a crucial role, either by staying to fight, or by preparing refuge, or by developing weapons that could work against the entities. In every timeline where things went badly, the humans had either been ignored or their warnings had been dismissed. The weapon's artificial intelligence systems began detecting something strange in the quantum foam that underlies all reality. There appeared to be stable pockets of space-time that existed outside the timeline fracturing effect. These pockets contained organized matter and energy patterns that suggested the presence of advanced technology and possibly large populations. The dimensional refugees, whispered Science Officer Kilmar as she analyzed the sensor data from multiple timelines. The humans did not just evacuate to another location. They evacuated to a pocket dimension that exists outside normal space-time. That is why they are not affected by the timeline fracturing. They are watching everything from outside reality itself. As this realization spread through the fractured timelines, people began to understand what the humans had actually done. They had not abandoned the galaxy out of cowardice or selfishness. They had created a backup copy of civilization itself, in a place where it would be safe from both the entities and from the Council's desperate attempts to stop them. The evidence was everywhere once people knew what to look for. The humans had left hidden monitoring stations throughout the galaxy that were still recording everything that happened in all the different timelines. They had prepared supply caches that would automatically activate when certain conditions were met. They had even left behind artificial intelligence systems that were designed to help other species deal with the aftermath of timeline fracturing. In the most stable timeline, Admiral Torok found a message beacon that had been programmed to activate, only when someone figured out what the humans had really done. The message was from Jung Onam, the temporal physicist who had helped design the evacuation plan. If you are receiving this message, then you have discovered our dimensional refuge, and you understand that we did not abandon you, the recording said. We spent 2 years trying to convince the Council to evacuate everyone to safety, but we could not make you believe that the threat was real. So we evacuated ourselves and prepared to help you when you finally realized that we were right. The message continued with technical details about how the refuge worked and how people could be evacuated there if the situation became too dangerous. We have been monitoring all timelines simultaneously, and we are prepared to intervene when the moment is right. But first, the timeline fracturing must stabilize into a single coherent reality that can support organized matter. We know that using the Universal Reset Protocol was your only option once the entities arrived. We also know that the weapon would fracture time and create multiple conflicting realities. We have prepared countermeasures that will allow us to guide the timeline collapse back toward a stable configuration. The message ended with coordinates for communication arrays that could reach across dimensional barriers. When you are ready to accept our help, send a signal on these frequencies. We will return to normal space and begin the process of repairing the damage that was necessary to stop the entities. But remember that we never left you. We were always watching and always ready to come back. As the multiple timelines continued to shift and merge and separate, the people of the galaxy began to understand that their salvation lay not in their own technology or their own weapons, but in trusting the species they had always considered. Too paranoid and too prepared for disasters that would never happen. The humans had been right about everything, and now they were the only ones who could fix the mess that had been created by ignoring their warnings. But first, someone had to swallow their pride and admit that the crazy paranoid humans had been smarter than all the other species combined. Council Speaker Vextar made the hardest decision of his long political career when he authorized the transmission that would ask the humans to come back and save everyone. His silver skin had turned almost black with shame as he spoke into the communication array that could reach across dimensional barriers. This is Council Speaker Vextar addressing the Human Federation wherever you may be hiding. We were wrong about everything, and you were right about everything. The entities came exactly as you predicted, and our weapons were useless exactly as you warned. We activated the Universal Reset Protocol, and it has fractured reality exactly as your scientist Taehyung-oh said it would. The transmission continued, as Vextar swallowed his pride and admitted what everyone already knew. We need your help to fix what we have broken. We need your technology to stabilize the timelines and repair the damage we have caused. We are asking you to return and save the people who ignored your warnings and dismissed your fears. We do not deserve your help, but we are asking for it anyway. The response came faster than anyone expected. Reality shimmered near the council chamber, and a hole opened in space itself. Through the hole came ships that looked like they were made of crystallized time with hulls that existed in multiple dimensions at once. The vessels moved through normal space as easily as they moved through the spaces between realities. The lead ship docked with the council station, and figures in environmental suits came aboard. When they removed their helmets, the delegates saw faces they recognized from old council meetings and diplomatic functions. But these humans looked different somehow, more confident and more prepared and more certain of themselves than they had ever seemed before. The human delegation was led by someone who introduced himself as Woojin Shin, a dimensional engineer who had spent the past year perfecting the technology needed to repair fractured timelines. With him came Yoonjung Yu, a diplomat who had been preparing for this exact conversation since the day the humans had first detected the approaching entities. "We never left," Yoonjung Yu said, as she addressed the assembled council delegates. "We have been watching everything from our dimensional refuge and monitoring all possible timelines simultaneously. We knew that you would eventually need our help, and we have been preparing for this moment for almost 2 years." She activated a holographic display that showed the current state of reality throughout the galaxy. The image looked like a shattered mirror with thousands of timeline fragments overlapping and conflicting with each other. But the display also showed stable paths through the chaos where the fragments could be guided back together into a single coherent reality. The Universal Reset Protocol did exactly what we predicted it would do, Woojin Shin explained as his fingers moved over control panels that seemed to exist in more dimensions than normal technology could handle. It created a cascade effect that fractured local space-time into multiple possible histories, but the fracturing follows mathematical patterns that can be predicted and controlled. We spent the past year developing technology that can guide timeline fragments back together in specific configurations. We can choose which version of events becomes the final reality and which versions are discarded into quantum probability space. But the process requires very precise coordination and timing. Council Speaker Vexatar felt hope for the first time since the crisis had begun. "What do you need from us? What can we do to help repair the damage we have caused?" Eunjung Yu smiled. in a way that was both kind and sad. First, you need to understand what really happened here. The entities were not invaders or destroyers. They were refugees fleeing from something even worse that exists in the deep void between galaxies. They consumed star systems not out of malice, but because they needed the matter and energy to maintain their existence while traveling between galaxies. The revelation hit the Council like a physical blow. They had activated a reality-destroying weapon to fight refugees who had been trying to escape from some unimaginable threat. Then we made everything worse, Delegate Morthak said with his rocky voice cracking with emotion. We destroyed beings who were just trying to survive. Not destroyed, Wu Jin-shin corrected gently. Displaced into alternate timelines where they can exist safely without affecting our local space. The timeline repair process will create stable pocket realities where the entities can live while we work on permanent solutions to their displacement problem. The humans began the timeline stabilization process by deploying devices throughout the galaxy that could anchor specific versions of reality while allowing others to fade away. The work required incredible precision because one mistake could collapse all timelines into quantum chaos that would make organized matter impossible. Commander Sang-hoon Kim led the military operations that protected the stabilization teams as they worked. His ships could phase between timelines at will, allowing them to fight entities and repair equipment in multiple realities simultaneously. But the real hero of the operation was scientist Yejin Park, who had developed the mathematical frameworks that made timeline navigation possible. The key insight, Yejin Park explained, as she worked at a control station that existed in 17 dimensions at once, is that consciousness creates stability in quantum systems. The more people who remember a specific version of events, the more likely that version is to become permanent reality. So we need everyone in the galaxy to focus their memories and thoughts on the timeline we want to preserve. The humans guided the Council through a galaxy-wide meditation process where billions of beings concentrated on remembering the same version of events. They chose a timeline where the entities had been peacefully relocated to pocket dimensions, where they could exist safely. A timeline where the Universal Reset Protocol had worked without creating permanent damage. A timeline where the humans returned as heroes rather than as people who had been forced to save ungrateful allies. Slowly, over the course of several weeks, the fractured timelines began to merge back together into a single, stable reality. The process was not perfect, and some things were lost that could never be recovered. But the essential structure of galactic civilization was preserved and improved in ways that no one had expected. The humans shared their dimensional refuge technology with every species that wanted it. They built evacuation systems that could protect entire populations if another existential threat ever appeared. They established early warning networks that could detect dangers from anywhere in the known universe and several places that were not supposed to exist at all. Most importantly, they took on the role that they had always been meant to play in galactic civilization. They became the species that prepared for impossible disasters and planned for threats that no one else wanted to think about. They became the immune system that protected organic life from existential dangers that conventional wisdom said could never happen. We learned something important during our time in the Dimensional Refuge, Yoon Jung-yu said during the final council session to address the crisis. Galactic civilization is stronger when it includes different kinds of thinking. You need species that are optimistic and hopeful and focused on building better futures. But you also need species that are paranoid and prepared and always watching for threats that might destroy everything you have built. We humans will always be the ones who prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. We will always be the ones who see dangers that others miss and who make plans for disasters that others think will never happen. This is not a burden for us, but a responsibility that we accept gladly because we know that someone has to do this job. The Council voted unanimously to create a new position in galactic government. The humans would serve as guardians of existential safety with the authority to implement emergency protocols if they detected threats that other species were not taking seriously enough. They would have the resources and support needed to prepare for any disaster, no matter how unlikely it seemed. As the humans prepared to bring their entire population back from the Dimensional Refuge, they made one final revelation that changed how everyone thought about their strange disappearance and dramatic return. We did not just save ourselves when we evacuated to the pocket dimension, Wu Jin-shin explained with a smile that held secrets. We saved complete copies of every other species as well. If the timeline stabilization had failed and reality had collapsed completely, we were prepared to rebuild galactic civilization from scratch, using the genetic and cultural templates we had preserved. You were never abandoned and you were never alone. Even when you could not see us or contact us, we were watching over you and making sure that no matter what happened, there would always be a tomorrow for everyone in this galaxy. The revelation that the humans had secretly saved everyone while appearing to save only themselves was the final proof that they truly understood what galactic civilization meant. They had accepted the responsibility of being the species that others could depend on, even when those others did not realize they needed protection. Years later, when new threats appeared from directions that no one had expected, the galaxy was ready because the humans had already seen them coming and made preparations.